Hey class. So what this presentation is going to do is I'm going to talk about sort of 8 simple rules I have for creating your foundational HTML. I'm going to talk about them briefly, and then we're going to use it in a site where we're going to look at the Photoshop design and we're going to convert that to HTML. Alright, so this is the Photoshop that we're going to use. It's a sort of a fake site I made up really quickly for my daughter's birthday, which actually did happen. And so the thing is, the first step here, when we're talking about the HTML, when you're converting a Photoshop to an HTML and CSS, the first thing we do is make the HTML. Then we start applying our styles on top of it. So these first couple screencasts, I'm going to do one for this. I'm going to do another one in a separate screencast for the site that Professor Kaisar made that you all looked at before. And just to give you an example, a couple different examples of converting design into HTML first, and then there'll be a next round where we'll take both of those HTML files and add CSS to them to make them look like the Photoshop design. So that's where we are now. So the first thing is getting this HTML out that is sort of our foundation for what you're going to do everything else on top of. And I have these 8 simple rules, sort of simple, to help you get there. So the first thing that you want to do is start with a valid document. All right, and it needs a good doc type, which in HTML5 is a lot simpler than this, by the way. It's just HTML. You need an HTML element. Here, right, so you need to write HTML element, and if it's an XML you're using, I'm using here XHTML strict, so it needs an XML namespace in it and an XML lang. And if you're using HTML 4.0 strict or transitional, then you would also still need this language here, which is that language element there. And then you want to have a character set. These things all have been covered before, but I'm just getting them again. So you have your meta element with your char set. Most of the time it's going to be this exact one, UTF-8. It handles most of the printed characters that you're going to run into. And then of course you have a title for your document. This is left untitled for now. And there. And so with that set, most of the rest of what you're going to do is to add in your HTML content, which is what we're going to focus on today. The next piece of that, which is we would start adding our CSS in here and add some style sheets to it to style it up. But right now what this is going to cover is really just that. Now one of the nice pieces here is if you want this document as XHTML strict, and I may put up a couple other ones, it's on our class blog. So I'm going to open that up here real quick, and it's web design. Oops. Alright, there we go. So let's open this up here. Fit that in the viewing window while it's coming open. Alright, so if you go to Basics, HTML, there's one called a blank page. And that talks about these different things that I mentioned. So it talks about doc type. It actually has here the 4 different kinds of doc types. So if you just wanted to use a different one, you could use that. So HTML transitional and strict, and XHTML transitional and strict. I didn't put HTML5 on here yet. It's actually so very simple, so it's not to worry about. But right now in this class, we're not using HTML5. And then it talks about language and character encoding. Alright, so HTML language here, character encoding, and so forth. And one of the reasons that we use character encoding is if you look at this image here, this is what the Japanese characters and the Cyrillic alphabet look like without the character encoding properly done. With the character encoding properly done, you'll see them as they are supposed to be seen. Alright, so a lot of you speak another language, and so that's what the UTF-8 character encoding does for you. But what I also have here is a blank XHTML strict document. So you can just open that up and use it, or you can copy and paste it, whatever you want, paste it into Dreamweaver, open it in Dreamweaver. I have one open here, and so this is that document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a save as here, and this is going to be for a site, my birthday. And I'm going to save it as the index.html. Sometimes also, if you're not sure if this is your exact going to be your exact index, I might call it template, or design, or give it some other name, just so you know that what it is. If you really know it is, you're just going to design right away your index page, then great. So I'm saving it as a different name. That way I still have my blank one left to use. And now what we're going to do is follow along each step of the presentation, and going back between that and this HTML file and our Photoshop file. So the next thing in the presentation is to remember that everything is a box. So if you look here, you can see that we have everything here is a box, whether it's a div, a div h1, or whatever else it is in design. In the web browser, it treats everything as a box, and this is actually coming from the web developer toolbar in Firefox. There's a way with that web developer toolbar where you can have it outline all your block level elements, and so that's what was done here. So you see all these little boxes around here are my block level elements that have been outlined. Right, so these are all block level elements, and it doesn't matter whether it actually looks like a block or not, it's a block. So you can, excuse me, I apologize again today, I'm a little congested still. You can see all these different pieces. And so that's part of your first thinking, is when you're going and you're looking at your design, one of the things that you want to think about is remember that everything here is a box. I'm going to turn off the columns for a second. So all these things are different boxes, and it's thinking about which boxes go where and what contains what. And so we're going to be thinking about that, and then we're also thinking about it in terms of our grid design as well, and what fits over what in terms of a grid. So we'll take a look at that too. So everything is a box. And if you want, you can actually start to add boxes and names to your Photoshop file. It's not required, but for some people it helps them visualize it and give names to things. So this is just an example, and this is a combination of using Photoshop text in here, and also just me just writing outright. This is a paragraph, or this is an H3, this is a paragraph here, and just thinking about what elements we're going to use. We're going to get to that a little bit more later on. First, what we really usually want to do is to think about starting from the outside and work in. So looking at the major sections first, that's the third rule, is you start outside, you do your major sections, and then you work in from that. Okay, so here's what we're going to do is when we're thinking about those major sections in our document, while we're on this step 3, let's take a quick look at our actual Photoshop file here, if I can get to it. So we have a few sections going on. I have one up here, which is sort of our main header section, and then I have this here, which I'm going to call friends and family, and then we have the read all about it area and the sort of video and images area there. So those are our 4 main sections on the page, and I've already actually given them sort of a names. Is what I did in Photoshop is I grouped those 4 areas into folders. So I was already thinking about that. You don't have to go that far, but as you get more used to this and you're going through your design and you think about things first, and often usually I would have, and I did actually drawn this out on paper a bit first, so I can look at it on paper and say, alright, here's generally what I want, and then I already know I can create folders in that and create all my stuff in groups in Photoshop, and it makes it a lot easier to do. And you can also then go in and turn things, individual things, on and off very easily, whole sections. And you can see there I missed a piece of text. I put it somehow in one of the wrong sections. Yeah, it looks like that text is in read all about it, and it should have been in the previous one, so I could go ahead and take a look at that. It's probably this. Is it that one? No. Is it one of these? Yeah, there we go. So I can grab that here, and it's very easy to move things down until it highlights the video, and now we're down in video, and that should, yes, go along with the video. Okay. Great. So yeah, you can see I have all my text in different layers here inside of each one of those. So those are my main 4 sections. I got the header and the friends and family and the read all about it and the video and images. So that's what I would think. Those are, and when I say here in grid design, you think in rows. So what do I mean by rows? In this case, there would basically be 3 rows on the design on the right here. There's the header row, and a row goes basically all the way across the page. So you're looking for content that has a similar top and bottom and goes all the way across the page. The next row would be all this stuff in here. That would be a second row, and then the third row is the footer. So in this design, there would be basically 3 rows, and I would start with divs for each of those rows and then fill in inside of those. Okay, so that's one of the things with grid design I found that helps a lot is think first in rows, looking all the way across the page and grouping things like that, and then we're going to move inside of those and group inside of that. Alright, and so we're going to use divs for those major areas. And so in this design here, there are 4 rows. So this is shown again. So and here, the rows are the logo, which goes across there, the header here, the content, and the footer. And then I would go inside of those rows and further differentiate things into cells. So in some cases, you have also sort of sub sets of things. So in this, there's only really like 2 things, so you can just say, okay, that's 8 columns and that's 4 columns or something like that. But here we have a slightly different situation. So let's clear that out and move to the next one and see how we do it. So in that case, I would use where these green boxes are, I'd put another div there, and so this div is 1 cell, and it's going to have multiple things inside of it that's going to be able to handle adding the navigation, the register, and so forth, and then another div over here. So especially when you see this situation like this, where you have one element that's tall that spans the sort of the same height as a few different elements, then usually what you're going to do is you're going to group that in one div and this in another, and then this would get 8 applied to it and 4 there, and then the stuff inside of here, you don't have to give this even widths on it. You don't have to worry because it'll naturally, remember a div, by the way, this is something I didn't cover to remind you. A div, when you make something a div, it automatically tries to fill as wide as it can go until it hits a border of a containing element around it. If there's no containing element, it'll go as wide as the page is, unless of course you give it a width. In terms of the height for a div, it does that based on the content inside of it. Okay, so I'll clear this out a little bit again so we can draw. So looking at that, these, if I just put a div here without any kind of class on it for how many columns wide it is, but I put one on here. Let's start with the outside one. So this one, let's say I put 8, and this one I have a grid 4. So any content in here, if this is just a div, it'll automatically expand to be 8. And same thing with this. Now this one here I don't, so that would be another nested one where I would have to give this div a class of whatever it is, let's say 6, and also that would get a grid 6 and an alpha because it's a nested one. And actually this, by the way, too, this here would get alpha and omega because they're nested. And actually, no, wait, would they need one? No, actually, they don't need one. Sorry, I apologize. These don't need one. They're not nested inside of anything else. I have a div around it, but that div doesn't have to get anything applied to it. So alpha, and then this would be, let's say, here grid 2 and omega. right? Because they're nested inside of this other eight column div here. All right, so that's sort of how it works. The rest of it here, this would be, grid 8, grid 4, and then this content here would just be right. We're going to put other stuff in there that would get further done. Okay, so let's do this for our piece. I'm going to do our major areas for going to our Photoshop file into our HTML. So again, I want to do one for header, friends and family, read all about it, and video images. But on top of that, I need one extra piece. So let's go to our HTML here, where we have some kind of container. All right, so we have our div here, and class equals, container, and how many columns we're going to use in our designs. This is a 12-column design. That's something that obviously should have been looked at a long time ago when we're starting. So this is our 12 columns. What you see on the little bit of left and right there, those are the margins that are on the outside of it. So we have a 12-column design, so I'm going to give a class 12. By the way, technically this container that's 12, if you wanted to, and I'm not going to show this right now, but just to keep in your head, I could decide that I want to have a section here that's 12 columns, and then a section here that's 16 columns, and then a section here that's 24 columns. And the only thing I would have to do is make sure I put a container 12, container 16, container 24 on each one of those. So you can actually mix and match the columns in a page, but I usually don't recommend it because it can make it a little more difficult to think through and work with. So we're going to stick with just one. So we start with our main div, which is a container 12 around everything. And then inside of that, we're going to put 4 divs, one for each of our header, friends and family, read all about it, and video and images. So I'm using a program that sort of helps write it a little bit faster, but you guys sort of get the picture. So this is ID equals header. So I'm taking my ID names basically off of what I have there, although IDs can't have spaces in them, so I'm going to have to keep this modified a little bit. And then another thing that I do that you don't have to do is I put an end for my major sections, end header. All right, because what happens is you start to get a lot of divs in here, and it can be hard to tell the difference from one to the next. So it's sort of like, okay, that's my header, but then, is this the end of the container or something else? And so I'm going to give this an ID just for now as well. ID equals wrapper. So this is sort of the wrapper that goes around everything. Okay. And I'm not giving it container just so I don't get confused with the container class from 960 grid system. If you're wondering why that container is a class and not an ID, it's so that you can be allowed to apply different ones to a page. Okay, so now I have my header, I have some ending elements, I have a wrapper, and I'm going to copy this 3 times so that I can put in my other pieces. So I had header, and now I'm going to have friends, family, and I'm just putting it as one word. In this case, you could do it however you want, or you could, capitalize things, but I'm putting it as one word, and then I'm going to change my comment there. And if you want to give yourself a little more space to make sure you can tell the difference between these, you can do that too. So I can add a little bit more space in between. Oops, I added that space inside of another one. Okay, so next we have up read all about it. Let's remove these columns. So that was header, we have friends and family, now it's read all about it. Read about, I'll just put that there. And then the last one is video images. And a lot of programs, if you double click on something, it highlights it, and then you can put it there. So now what we have is we have our wrapper around everything, and then we have a div for each of our major sections: our header, friends and family, read about, video images. Alright, and if you want to see how this looks in the browser, we can take a look at that too. Okay, so I call it index.html, and right now, nothing. Okay, there's a few other things, by the way, that you should make sure you change, but one of the most important ones being the title. Okay, so this is a great start, and like what I want you to hopefully get out of this as well is that this is not super hard. It's just sticking with what you're doing and going through it step by step, and remembering, mostly what we're doing is going through with divs. So we have those divs there, and then if we look at our presentation, we might need some other small sections, but the next step in our process is to make sure all of our divs get IDs or classes. So we've done that so far. Unique divs get IDs. So the difference between an ID and a class, and I want to mention this now, and we'll see it later as we go along, is if that section only appears once on the page, like your header, a navigation, a footer, it gets an ID. So that's what it's meant by unique divs. Divs that are only going to exist one place on the page are IDs. If it appears in multiple places, so for example here with the articles, then you give it a class. Because IDs can only be applied to one element of the page, class can be applied to as many elements as you want. And the last one is navigation as a list. And actually I don't have navigation on this example, so maybe I should add it in. But I want to go through and finish out all of our divs and classes here. So we're going to add this content here and make everything basically what it is. And I'm going to just go back to a previous slide here that we did. And for the most part, there's only a few different elements that you're going to use on a page. So and you can see them right here. So let's just write them out. So one is headings. So like this, H1, H2, H3, those are headings on your page. The next one is most text here, like this, is going to be a paragraph. Even if it's somewhat specially formatted, like this here, that's often too just a paragraph. And then things like navs are lists. So this is an unordered list with li elements inside of it. You have little tags, like image, img, for your images. And that's about it. So here we go. Here's another couple lists that we have over here. That's pretty much, for the most part, if you know headings, paragraphs, lists, and image, that's 90% of what all content on the web is. And then we have a few other pieces that we can add later, which I'm not even going to show you today. So you have tables for tabular data, and block quotes if you have a quote, and some things like that. But most of the stuff is heading, paragraph, list with some images thrown in. And so we're going to see how we can do that here. So let's look at what we have here, and I'm going to write some notes around things. So I'm going to mark this up a little bit, and actually I'm going to do it in Photoshop itself. So I'm going to go to columns here. I'm going to add another column, and I'm just going to say, element names. Okay, and then I'm just going to use a brush tool here. Pick a color. Let's make it some kind of green will stand out, kind of a bright green, and change my size. Okay, and then we're going to add in a layer and make sure that layer is inside that group. Okay, it's not cooperating with me right now. There we go. Okay, so my layer's inside of there, and So I'm going to go on that layer, and it's just going to let me draw things out. So I can draw on here, and this is going to be H1. Actually, it's going to make that a little bit bigger. So make my brush size a little bit bigger here. Okay, so we can see it at this big area. So that's H1. This is just an image. Now, an image is an inline element, so even though that's an image, I'm going to need to have a paragraph or some other block level around it. So for now, we'll just put a little paragraph there and put our image. And then I'm looking down the page and trying to see, what's what and what I'm doing. So I have the friends and family here, but right now that is slightly different size than what's over here with the video and the images, although it's the same font. So I'm just going to make it a little easier on myself and call this H2. Alright, we'll put this as H3, H4, H5. Now you could do it that way. That's one way to do it. However, usually the other part with adding your headings in and thinking about your headings is that you want to do it in a hierarchical way. So probably this friends and family is basically the same thing as the video and the images. It's just kind of marked off. And read all about it is somewhat similar, but not quite. And actually, if I look here at what I did in terms of, I'm going to erase some of this stuff here. What I did in terms of the font size, that also gives me a hint as to what I'm doing as well here, and what I'm thinking about in terms of hierarchy. So this is something on the page that often you guys don't think about at first, and it's hard to, but you'll get a little more used to it. So I'm going to click here and look at friends and see if I can pull this down so you guys can see it there. Alright, so that is 56 point for that. This one is 78 point on there. This is a 42 point font. This is also 42 point as well. And then I got these little titles here that are down in 30. So again, we had 56, 78, and then those are both 42. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, going back to my brush and making sure, by the way, I go back to this layer, because by clicking on those texts I went to a different layer, that this is going to be H2, this is H3, these are both H4, and this is H5. So I have 5 headings on this document, and I've already given the major areas out here, but this here is just a paragraph. This is a paragraph here, paragraph of text. These are also like images here. So I know that I'm just going to put eyes on these because I don't have room to write right now. Images, image. And then to get this border here, it means this has to also be some kind of div. That's this box here. So that box is a div. Well, this is an H3, so this will be some kind of div or paragraph. Here, that's a block level element that'll let me get those borders around that. It's the easiest way to do that. So I've kind of looked through it and thought of everything, and as you can see, most of the time everything is really just heading or paragraph or image or list. So now we can go through and actually start to add some of this stuff onto our page. So let's do that. And what I'm going to see if we can do is make it a little faster to move back and forth here, since we don't really need the full width, and that'll sort of semi be in the background of what we're doing. Okay, so in the header I have my H1, my 4th birthday. and I also have that image that's inside of a paragraph. Because remember, you can't just put an image anywhere. So I have a paragraph, and I have in there an image. And right now we don't have a source for that image. Right? And I'm using XHTML strict, so because I'm using XHTML strict, all tags have to have a closing, so that's why this image has to have that closing there. If you're using HTML transitional, say, or HTML as your doc type, you wouldn't need to have that there, but with XHTML, you do need to have it. Okay, and I might even, for now, one of the things that you do want in an image, although I don't have the source, is a couple pieces, and this is the one big accessibility thing that I'm going to be looking at with you all, is you want to have an alternate tag. So I'm going to say an alternate attribute, alt equals, and then you basically describe what this image is. So picture of Maya in pigtails holding a toy stuffed bunny. Alright, so this is for someone who can't see. They'll be able to hear the text that you have there. Another good thing to have is the width and the height of the image. And you can get that out of your files here. If I show the guides, so we might show the guides here, and I'm going to zoom in actually a little bit because this is sort of hard to do. Not zoomed in. It starts here at that corner and goes over like that, right? So that's my image. And remember, to help it snap there, under View, under Snap To, you make sure you have Guides selected. Okay, and then we can go in and look at our information. And it's going to tell us the width and the height, 940 by 416. Right, so now I know the width and the height of that image, which we haven't even put out yet, but eventually we'll have that image out. So I'm just going to plop this back here. Okay. And it will be that size. Later we're going to learn how to slice and get these images out in that way. But for now, we can just put that in our HTML. Width equals, I forgot it already, 940, and height is 416. Okay. 940, height equals 416. So why do I put that here? One of the reasons is normally you don't put a lot of attributes on your elements, like showing their size. But with images, if you put the attribute in your HTML, it helps your browser render the page faster. Because essentially, remember, your browser is going to first download all this HTML. And then separately, it's going to have to go and ask for all the images and add the images in. If you give a width and a height attribute to the image, the browser knows the box that that image needs to fit in. If you don't give it a width and a height, what the browser does is it just sort of has a small little placeholder for the image, and then when it downloads the image, it looks at it, sees its width and height, and then readjusts the layout of the page according to the image. So this helps the browser kind of load a little bit faster. So there we go. We have our image that's a width and a height. And let's go back here now. So going down to the next piece is our friends and family. So in this case, we have a couple other pieces that we got to look at in terms of doing it. So we knew our basics of the H3 and the images here, but really it's a couple different columns that we're using as well. So making sure my brush is selected here. So we really have, when we're looking at it here, turn off my marquee tool. Okay. We really have a column here. And see, I have snap to guide. So once the guides are on, when you're starting to draw these lines, it'll sort of snap to them as well. which is kind of funny. Even your brush tool does that, although not obviously super well if I'm doing it fast. So these are my two columns. So I want each of these in a column. So in grid design, that's the other thing that you're looking at, is you're looking at sort of these cells here. So I'm going to do one for each of these pieces to be able to separate those out together. So essentially what the divs do, and what you're kind of looking at here, is divs group elements together that are related. So friends in that images are related together, and family in the other images are related together. And so we're going to do that, and then I can later we'll know exactly how wide to make each of these. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So each of these is going to be 6 wide here when we do it, but I'm not even going to get to that yet. We're just going to sort of put the content in, and then we're going to add the grid classes. So I want to have these divs here for each one, a friends div, a family div, and then the h3 and an image inside of each one. So let's look at that. So we're inside of friends and family here, and we're going to add a div, and the ID is going to be friends, and inside of that I'm going to add my h3, which is going to say friends, and a paragraph, which is going to have my image with my source. Oops. An alt, my running with friend, holding hands, and a width and a height. And let's go see what that width and height is for that. So on this one, it's a little bit different. The image width and the height is different from the box. I left this sort of border around it, and so the image width and height is here 417. I think that's a little off. I think it's actually 420 that the width and the height is. Yeah, I can do that again. So one thing you can also do if you want to help it snap is you can pull off a new guide to line up right on the edge. Oop. And by the way here, make sure you're using this tool if you want to move your guides around. You can also lock your guides once you're done. So I'm just pulling from there out, so I can make sure, okay, yeah, that's exactly what I want. Also, this line here, I hadn't quite lined that up right, so let's make sure that's exactly lined up. And I'm pulling one from the top. So you can also do this. This is another way that when you're putting out your images in the first place to help you get them. And now, when I use this marquee tool here, it's boom, snapped right to those guides. I get my height on my info here of 426 wide. Okay, so it's 426 by 286. Alright, so now I know what that's going to be there. So I'm going to go here and type that in. 426 and 286. Okay, and that's actually, as we're starting to go here, I'm going to start looking at it in the browser again. So we're starting to see here. So there we got Maya's 4th birthday. There's that picture. Here's friends. Maya running with friend holding hands. And you notice if you put the alt in there, this is another good way to do it before you add your CSS and your actual images in. You can make sure you have the proper alts in there that make sense to you as you're looking at it. So there we go. And then I'm just going to copy the friends div, since I'm a little lazy with these things, and that's basically it. And the other div is the same, except that it's called family for the div, and this is family, and the image is Maya on the couch with her little brother and a cousin. Right, and it's the same height and width on the image. Right, so I've added one now, this div for friends and one for family, that are going to match up to those two sections that I have here for the friends and for the family. And I'm not even worried at this point about columns and all sorts of other stuff. In fact, even if you weren't, if you're designing not with grid-based design, I would be doing the same basic thing we are here. So what the grids do is they help you figure out the widths of these things in both stages of it. That's really mostly what the grids do for you. So I'll save that. We can look at it in the browser again. So what you'll see is, in this stage, everything is on top of each other. And so when we add the grid stuff in, that's when they're going to move around and get, sort of a little more nicely laid out. So there we go. Let's keep moving on to the next part here. All right. For now, I'm just going to hide these other pieces here and move this toolbar back over. So we have an H element, and then we have these three things here. Now those are all H4s, right? Remember, this was H4, 2, H4. So what this is telling me is that these are together, these are kind of columns. So here we go, boom. These are divs here. So whenever you have a grouping of elements, guess what? It's a div that groups those elements together. And then this is its own H2 that goes across here, across the whole page. So have an H2 in there, and then 3 divs for presence, food, and fun, and that's what I'll probably just give them the names of presence, food, and fun. I'll give them those IDs in case I need to target them ever for some reason, but in this case, not really. And I'm going to do 1 here, and then going to copy that for the other 2. So this is again where our IDs come into place. I can easily find read about, and we're going to put in our div, div there, and that's going to get. Actually, sorry, we're not starting with the div. Let's go back here. We start with our H2, which is the read all about it. Okay, and then we have our 3 divs after that, right? So this is our H2, and then we have our 3 presence, food, and fun. So there's our div, and the idea is presence. And inside of that, we have our H4. So you see how like a little planning ahead makes this part go a lot faster. Presence, paragraph. And now, by the way, in case you want a quick way to get these paragraphs here with dummy text inside of them, you could copy from your Photoshop file, which is one way to do it. But if you want different kinds or different lengths or things like that, or or whatever, another site you can visit is called HTML Ipsum. Okay, so HTML Ipsum has a whole bunch of different examples of elements that you might want to use in groups of elements. And it's freezing up on me for a second here. There we go. Okay, and the cool thing is, let's say this is I want these to all just be a little medium paragraph. If you click the title here, I don't know if you could see that flash. It said copied to keyboard and clipboard. Sorry, not keyboard. And then so what I can do now is once I click that and copy it, I can just paste it in here. Control V or Command V on a Mac, and boom, I have that pasted in. So now I have my presence div, and I can copy that and change it to food. Oops. Lowercase f. On my IDs, I almost always keep everything lowercase. If in XHTML you have to have this part be lowercase, but in here you can do whatever you want. And so in XHTML, all these elements in their attributes are lowercase. Food, and then we add the other div here for fun. So now I have those 3 divs for the presence, food, and fun, each with their title in it. Excuse me. And so let's go and take a look at that. So there we go. We have read all about it, and presence, food, and fun. And again, don't worry about how it looks at this point. Really, the whole point is to get a good structure for your page, and this is going to make it much easier to add other things in at a later date when we're adding our styling. So the next And sort of last section we have here is down at the bottom with our video and images. And for that, we have a few things here too. So there's sort of a group here that's going to be a div, and then a group here for our images and galleries, which is a div. But inside of that, we have three here. So we have sort of some text, and then we have gallery 1 and gallery 2. Alright, so what I'll do is I'll start with the outer ones. I'll start with these divs here, and this one I'll call video, and this one I'll call images, and then we'll work our way in. Remember, this is H5, this is H5, H5, that one was H4, and it's up to you if you want to do it this way. I have a Wacom tablet, so it's much easier to write this stuff out. If you don't want to, like the other easy way to do this, and I remember I'm doing it on this layer so I can hide it easily, is just print it out on a piece of paper, or just draw this on a piece of paper and just do it by hand, and just do it with a pencil. It should just be easy for you, something you can reference back. So I'm going to start with the video div and then the images one. In this case, they're not exactly the same, so we'll have to modify them a little bit each time. And this was an H4 for those tags. So oops, wrong one. Let's go into here. So I'm going to scroll down, find my video images, and so I can add a div, and this is have an ID equal to video, right? And we'll close that div off there, and then inside of it we have our H4 for video. And then we're going to have, excuse me, our little title there. So that was a H5 video. That was all lowercase. Video gallery. And then a little paragraph here with an image inside of it. img source equals whatever. Alt is, I'm just going to say still frame from my birthday video for now, and then we have a width on that and a height. Now this actually might end up being an actual video, and so then you would just upload it to YouTube or whatever, and you could copy your embed code and place it in place of here and stuff like that. But for now, I'm going to keep this as a still frame. I can have some good control over it. We're going to go back and find out what the size of this thing is. I'm going to hide this for a minute and show my. So under here, I'm going to show back my guides. And so this goes there, and I'm just going to pull another couple of guides right onto the top just to make it easier for myself. And this actually will later on also make it easier to make the slices. If you want to slice these images out, if you don't have them separately and you need to slice them, those guides can help. And so that now, when I go in here, I can get that and get the info on it. 300 by 229. Okay, and then let's take a look at this again, see how we're doing. So we're starting to do video. We got video gallery, looking good so far. So the next piece is after video, we have images, and that's another div. Let's put this back in again. The images div going out here, and then we'll add the elements inside of the images div. So images, and then we have here an H4 images. And now this next piece, you might be wondering, so how we're going to do that? And essentially, it's just that each of these would get, you know, a different grid on it, but we'd have to make sure that if we're doing this as a grid, when we're doing a grid design, that we give an alpha to this, because this is a sorry, I still have that selector on. Remember, when you have something selected, you can only draw or do anything inside of that selection. Okay. This would get an alpha because it's a nested one, and this over here, this one would get omega. Let me hide these. It's making it hard for me to draw. Alright, so remember, when you do it, the first one gets alpha, and then the last one gets omega if you have nested elements. Alright, so we're going to, it's paragraph, just a plain paragraph, and then 2 divs with h5s and images inside of them. So that's what we have here. So we start off with that paragraph, and if you wanted to, you know, you could copy some of that, this other paragraph that we had here. So we're starting with that paragraph, and then we go on to the next one. With these now, we have to, because these are grouped together, this title and the 2 images, we put it, this is going to be a div and a div for each one of those. Right? And you don't have to give it an ID if you don't want to, but you could give it, you know, a gallery 1 or a gallery 2 div ID, which I'll do here just to help me differentiate it. So gallery 1, and that has inside of it an h5, which says gallery 1, gallery 1. Excuse me. And then we have our images inside of that as well. Now, images are inline, so if we make the images wide enough, they'll just automatically break down. And we're actually, technically, since we're in a div of already, we don't have to do anything else. We could just put an image element here. And this is the kind of thing that sometimes I might start off this way, and then later as I go, I might decide I need to change it for some reason. And I'm just going to put some simple alts here just to keep it short, and because I don't have my real images, as you probably are guessing, I just copied these things down a few times. Normally, I would probably have had a couple of images from those galleries. So alt equals gallery 1 1. This is really bad. I would never normally do this, but I'm just doing it for here. Width equals and height equals. Right, and so then we'd need a width and height on these as well. Just to save you all a little bit of time, and since we've done it before, I'm going to just sort of zoom in here and do this a little bit by eyeballing it, not quite so exact. Okay, and that's 138 by 104. And if this changes later, I can change that. But this is why this stuff does take a little bit of time. Did I miss the closing one? My last one, I did. I missed closing that off. Okay. So that's one image, and then we have another image in there. Let's put that way. So that's my gallery 1, and then we have the same thing, copying that and pasting it for gallery 2. Two. And so let's now take a look at what we have. So there's video, and then we have gallery 1, gallery 2. Alright. Oops, I wrote gallery 21 by accident here. So now we've basically done the first step, which I'll bring this back down again. So we've taken this design and converted it into HTML. And we have a very basic HTML page here. That's basically what we want. Now what I'm going to do is go now for the next step and put in our grid elements as well. And that's going to be in the next video.